Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to discuss the lunar eclipse or chandra grahan that's happening March 3rd, 2026. This talk is from a Vedic astrology perspective, or Jyotish as it's known as in Sanskrit. Vedic astrology is ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. And as part of this talk, I'm going to discuss the national birth chart of Iran, which has been in the news quite a bit in the last few days. So let's take a look. And note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. And you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. Okay, so some announcements and also general orientation, especially for those of you who are new to the channel. First of all, I wanted to say, my heart really goes out to people right now. It's a very sensitive and tumultuous time. So hopefully this talk today will give some insights about what's going on, why, and when things might change. So just know that I'm very mindful of that at this moment. Also, in terms of eclipse videos, I have quite a few that may be helpful during this time to work with the energies of eclipses. Again, with eclipses, it's always, expect the unexpected. Now, it's not always expect the worst, so just make that differentiation for yourself. Sometimes things are going a very good direction that's unexpected. But anyway, the eclipse videos that I have already posted, symbolism of Rahu Ketu, symbolism of Sun, symbolism of Moon, also lunar and solar eclipses. Rahu, Ketu, the nodes of the Moon, and Sun and Moon, you need those to line up in order to get an eclipse. That's why they're important. Also, auspicious timing of eclipses, and then I have mantras for Rahu, Ketu, and eclipses if you'd like to start a mantra practice for eclipses now or in the future. Also, auto dubbing is available on this channel in the various languages listed here. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. And wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. Also, my channel is all about playlists so that videos are easy to find. So this type of video on eclipses is in my Gochar Planetary Transits playlist. And also because I'm talking about the birth chart of Iran, it'll be in the birth charts of famous places. Okay, but there are other playlists as well. The other thing is that I do analysis of a lot of famous birth charts, people, places, and moments in time. And I have a video titled Birth Chart Archive 2025, where I list most of the famous charts I've analyzed on the channel and the videos you can find them in. But I'll be updating that soon because it looks like I'm getting in the habit of updating that in April or springtime. Some of the newest videos that I've posted, in case you missed any: birth chart synastry compatibility for Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, solar eclipse or surya grahan on 17th February 2026, where I discussed Lindsey Vohn's birth chart. She's an Olympic skier from the United States, as well as the Winter Olympics that just finished in Milan, Italy. Also, Mrigashirsha nakshatra, the seeking star. And then my last video was planetary transits or Gochar from March 2026. That one may be particularly interesting to you if you're interested in like the astrology of Iran, because I posted that video a few hours before, again, things started getting haywire for Iran. And so in that video, I talked a lot about leadership and shifts and changes with leadership, which is relevant for the future of Iran. So that'll give you an overall kind of collective energy about the current astrological energies that we're looking at and working with. Also, if you're new to Vedic astrology and want to learn more, I have a list of videos at the end of the slide that I would look at first to get a really solid foundation. Also, again, I've done a lot of analysis of famous places around the world, and this slide gives you a list of, I think, most of them. So, like the United States, I've looked at in 3 different videos, actually. Transits of May 2022, best time for a new leader, also introduction to Shah sequence. Especially that introduction to Shah sequence might be quite relevant to today's talk, because in that video I talk about how the United States is currently running planets that are very similar to when it went through its initial American Revolution, and also when it went through its Civil War. So, that means that there's going to be a lot of similar activity in terms of, fighting and skirmishes and disputes and things like that. So that might be interesting to some of you. Other places I've looked at: New York State, United Kingdom, Israel, Ukraine, Russia, Sudan, Canada, Moscow. And again, on the right, you can see the videos that you can find them in. New Amsterdam, which is also known as New York City. That was the original name for New York City. Mexico, China, Chile, Greenland, Bangkok and Thailand, Gaza and Palestine, New Zealand, Turkey, and Australia. So, yeah, for those of you who are really interested in, again, mundane astrology, that's a lot of what I do, or geopolitical astrology. Those might be interesting for you. Okay, so let's dive into the eclipse chart first off. This is just a chart with no markings and no notes. So especially those of you who do astrology or are a student, you can kind of look at this yourself and see what you see before you hear anything I have to say about it, and get your own thoughts, together about it. Yeah, so the time of this chart is March 3rd, 2026, 6:37 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, New York time. That's the time zone that I live in. All right, so let's see. Also, kind of the outline for today's talk. First, I'm going to discuss the eclipse path for this March 3rd eclipse. Then I'm going to go do a deep dive into the eclipse chart, as well as look at the amshas or sub-zodiacs for more timing and details on this particular eclipse. Then I'm going to be looking at the national birth chart of Iran. And as part of that, I'll be looking at charts for recent events related to the country, as well as synastry or compatibility between the countries that are involved, as well as the leaders that are involved, because the U.S. and Israel both simultaneously bombed Iran. So I'll be looking at the synastry of those three countries and their leaders. Okay, so the eclipse path first. You can see here the part in the middle here that's the darkest. That's where you're going to have the most visibility of the eclipse. And so in Vedic astrology, the places in the world that have the most visibility with eclipses are more influenced, or thought to be more influenced by the energies of eclipses. So you can see right here in the middle, we've got like the northwest of the United States and Canada, the northeast of Asia. So it looks like Russia, China, Korea, Japan, those areas, eastern Australia, New Zealand, as well as all the islands in the Pacific Ocean. But then it leads out, right? But you can see like Africa, quite a bit of Europe is kind of off the hook here as far as this eclipse is concerned. Not that they won't feel it at all, but it'll be lessened. Okay. Okay, so now the lunar eclipse chart. So again, what are some of the first things we notice about this chart? Well, right at the top here, we've got 4 planets in one house. So that's a pretty big deal. It's what we call a Pravraja yoga in Vedic astrology. It's similar to the concept of a stellium in Western astrology. When you have a bunch of planets, especially like 3, 4, or more in one house, that gives what we call life focus, because all those planets are bringing those energies to one house. Okay. So the rising sign here, if you're not familiar, this is a North Indian style chart. That's what I use in my work. Um, and so the first house here, ascendant rising sign, that's that top diamond in the middle where that big green circle is. Okay. Yeah, so in Sanskrit we call it the lugna. So the lugna is important because it sets the tone for the whole chart, or if this is a person, like their physicality and personality. To get to the other houses, you count inclusively from the first house counterclockwise or up and to the left. So that upside down triangle in the upper left corner with Saturn and Venus in it, with the little 12 in the bottom corner, that's the second house. The reason why there's a 12 in the bottom corner is because that refers to the constellation that's in that house. The 12 constellation is Pisces. So the second house is a Pisces or Mina house. The first house in this chart is Aquarius or Kumbha. So we have an Aquarius rising or Kumbha lugna here. Okay, that we're dealing with. So that's also important, being an Aquarius rising, because that's a fixed air sign, or stira vayu. So with fixed air, basically these are long-standing ideas or ideology that we're dealing with here. Okay. The Lugna nakshatra is a lunar mansion. There are about 27 of them. They all have different energies, and the moon passes through one every night. After about 27 nights, you get a lunar month. Okay. So the Lugna nakshatra for this chart is Purva Bhadrapada, which is pretty intense, actually. The symbol for Purva Bhadrapada is the front legs of a funeral pyre. So a very destructive type of energy. So flames and things turning to ash and, you know, quite a bit of destruction. Okay, so that in and of itself, this nakshatra is going to bring to this whole chart this energy of end, transformation, and release as well. Because especially with funeral pyres in India, we're talking about cremation. So it's thought in that culture that cremation helps to release the soul from the physical body or vessel. Okay. Um, and so we have, again, this focus, Pravraja Yoga, on a lot of end, transformation, and release. Okay. Also in that Pravraja Yoga, okay, we've got Mercury there. It's retrograde. That line under Mercury means it's retrograde. It also has Digbala directional strength because of its position in the first house. Um, Mercury is also in Purva Bhadrapada. Mercury symbolizes things like the analytical, logical mind, speech, thought, decisions, plans. It's going retrograde, meaning it's like reviewing or revising those things. And then again, it's in Purva Bhadrapada, so it's like, destroying them, actually, in fact, potentially. Okay. So this could be revising or deconstructing plans, ideas, and words. The other thing is, even though Venus in this chart is in the second house, just a few days back when things started going haywire for Iran, on the international stage here, Venus and Mercury were both in Purva Bhadrapada, and they were in planetary war. So Venus represents social grace, diplomacy, compassion. That was also in the funeral pyres. That was, turning to ash. And then the war between Mercury and Venus is going to make them both unstable. So it was really kind of the, how do I say, like the uh, flashpoint, if you want to think about it that way. When again, Iran first got bombed. But again, here we're just looking at the eclipse chart and how it might affect people generally. So the thing is, wherever your Aquarius house is in your chart, that's where a lot of this transformation is going on. So it may not be your first house, but maybe it's your fifth house or your eighth house or whatever. So you want to think about that. And then the other thing is a lot of these planets, this eclipse is lining up on the Aquarius Leo axis. So you also want to consider Leo and where that is in your chart, because that's also going to go through transformation. So Mercury's, in trouble here. And then we have, in addition, we have a bhavat bhavam sun. So bhavat bhavam is a house of the house concept. So basically, sun is the lord of the seventh house related to spouse-like partner, business partners, independent business, and path forward in life. So the seventh lord has gone 7 houses away to the first house, meaning there's going to be one partner after another who's involved in this large-scale transformation. Okay. Also in this Praraja, we have Rahu. It's the north node of the moon. It's in Shatabhisha nakshatra. Oh, I didn't mention. Oh, Sun and Rahu are both in Shatabhisha nakshatra. Shatabhisha translates as 100 healers. So when we have planets in this part of the sky, it can indicate things that are difficult to heal, diagnose, heal, treat, any of those things. Sun represents the president, king, head of state. And Rahu, the north node of the moon, brings this hidden, unexpected quality, also an ambitious energy. So this could be a leader who's quite ambitious and difficult to handle or manage. Okay. So it could also mean that there's difficulties with health. Sometimes, especially when we have Sun in Shatabhisha, that might even indicate, because Sun can represent medicine besides health. So that might be somebody who's actually a healer. But in this case, I don't think that's the case, because all of these planets lined up on the 1-7 axis here are all malefic planets. Sun, Mars, Rahu, Ketu, those are all natural malefic planets. Mercury, because it's with all these natural malefics, becomes a natural malefic. And then Moon, because it's eclipsed, even though it's a new moon, is also a natural malefic. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Was it six natural malefics on the 1-7 axis? And the first house, again, ascendant, represents the self, and the 7th house represents partnerships, personal and professional. So a lot of fighting going on here, okay? And it's difficult to handle, manage, and ameliorate. Also in the first house here, we have Mercury and Mars. Mercury and Mars can symbolize computers, and then Rahu can symbolize technology. So there can be a lot of technological, issues going on here. So besides Iran and that whole story, another big story that happened in the United States was there was a AI software company that has been a partner of the Defense Department of the United States. So it had a huge government contract, and the Department of Defense or Department of War, I think they changed the name, Department of War, I guess they call it now. They said that they wanted all the safety features to be eliminated for them to continue using it. And the company said no. So that company lost that huge contract and it went to another artificial intelligence company. But that also, this whole lineup of fighting technology and hardline ideology, what we're getting in this chart, is also relevant for that situation as well. The fighting, I don't think I mentioned exactly, but Sun and Mars. So Sun is a president or king, it's a leadership planet. Mars is also a leadership planet, but it's commander in chief of the army. It's also more of a CEO, like roll your sleeves up, get involved with the nitty gritty details and operational details of an organization or project. So those two together bring a lot of management as well as administrative, leadership energy. Now, they're also two fiery planets, so that means that there can be a lot of fighting going on, which again, with all this whole lineup of malefics here, um, is probable. Mars is in a nakshatra called Dhanishta. Dhanishta is symbolized by a drum, so it's related to rhythm. The star of Dhanishta is Mars, so Mars is in its own star. Rahu is also, I don't know if I mentioned that, Rahu being in Shatabisha is also in its own star. So Mars is quite strong, Rahu is quite strong. Mars represents erratic action, fighting, rebellion, innovation. Fighting can be violence as well, especially with this lineup. I would assume that's true. But Mars and Dhanishta can symbolize like a military type energy. Like you can think of those like military parades where everybody's like lined up and they're walking together and that sort of thing. But with Mars and Rahu here, there can be disruption of physical rhythm, related to military leadership here. Yeah. Or physical leadership of some kind, or, again, arguments, that kind of energy. So again, wherever your Aquarius and Leo houses are, we've got this kind of energy going on. Okay, so what else do we see in this chart? Okay, so this Pravraja that's right at the top, this conglomeration of planets at the top, there is actually some hope, maybe literally, for at least the Aquarius side of this Aquarius Leo axis. Okay, so the Leo side has only malefics related to it. At least the Aquarius side has this Jupiter aspecting from the 5th house, and Jupiter's quite strong because it's a retrograde. Jupiter is also Swa because it's in its own star. Okay, so Jupiter is one of the great benefics, or considered to be the great benefics. It represents balance, fairness, truth, philosophy, optimism. What else? Generosity, compassion, diplomacy. It's also spiritual, counseling, that kind of thing. So at least the Aquarius side of this, eclipse has this Jupiterian energy associated with it. Okay. So Jupiter's in a nakshatra called Punarvasu. That can still be sharp because it's the symbol of that is a quiver of arrows. So that box of arrows that archers carry on their back, and they pull out the arrows and they shoot them off, and then sometimes they go retrieve the arrow and put them back. So there's a cycling energy. So this can be cycling energy going on and on about this fighting. Okay. But there's some, at least, attempt at fairness, at least from the Aquarius side of this. Okay. Um, but this can, involve speech because Jupiter is and Mercury. These are both speech and communication planets. Jupiter and Mercury are also news planets. So whatever this is, this big fight going on, it's probably newsworthy. And again, both Jupiter and Mercury are in retrogression right now. So reviewing maybe the advice or spirit or education, related to this skirmish going on here. Jupiter also represents, especially when it's with Mars, and again, they're together by aspect here, legal issues. Okay. Whether it's, in your town or international law. Jupiter also in the fifth house here, what we call a Karkobau and Naja Jupiter. So Jupiter in the fifth house, Jupiter represents children, the fifth house represents children. But when you have Jupiter in the fifth house, that actually creates a problem. It's almost like there's too much energy there. So there can be a problem with children. Again, this could be like, for an individual situation, but for a larger, collective energy or nation, this might even be future, future generations. Yeah. So, and Jupiter also represents finance on its own, but especially in Aquarius rising chart, Jupiter is the lord of the second house of assets, and it's also the lord of the 11th house of income. Okay. So there's going to be a lot of, financial revision going on here as well. And again, at least as far as Iran is concerned, like it's only been what 2-3 days, already the oil prices around the world have dropped sorry increased pretty dramatically because of all these events, military events going on in the Middle East. um, Overall, I would say for this chart, wait, let me just finish up this 1-7 axis here. Okay, so we do also have on this 1-7 axis, the moon. We have an eclipsed moon aspecting Raja Yoga. So moon is in Purva Phalguni. Purva Phalguni is symbolized by a hammock or a marital bed. It's related to the finer things of life and socializing and, good times and that sort of thing. Now, the moon is there, which may potentially indicate like public enjoyment, but it's with Ketu, and Ketu is a separationist kind of ending type of. So this is like the end of public enjoyment going on here. Okay. This could be a loss of emotion. Moon represents emotion and public. So, yeah, there's some losses here. So basically, there's also with Moon and Mercury on, with this many malefics, these are the two mind planets. Moon is the emotional, intuitive mind. Mercury, again, is the analytical, logical mind. So this is a lot of a mind scramble as well. Okay. Um, so, yeah, so, this chart, though, somewhat surprisingly, um, because of all this obvious stuff in the middle here, this is actually a Jupiter-dominated chart because Jupiter is on these 4 planets in the stellium, or the Raja Yoga, and it's the lord of the house where Saturn and Venus are. So Jupiter is keeping at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of the other 8 planets. It's bringing some benefic energy. The only thing, though, is again, this Leo house doesn't have any benefic influence on it. Okay, so this Leo house is really, feeling the pressure and, again, probably very explosive because, again, Mars aspecting into a house where Ketu is. Mars and Ketu are both explosive energies, and when you get them together, that's when you can really, like, spark a flame that ignites a huge fire. The other thing is that the planet symbol of the 7th house, which is about relationships with Venus, and Venus, again, the planet symbol or Karaka for the 7th house has gone 8 houses away to it's the 8th house from the 7th, which is like long-term, deep chronic problems. So yeah, especially the Leo house, there is some strength for this Leo house because Sun is aspecting its own sign. So there's some strength, but again, Sun is rolling through Shatabisha right now, which is difficult to heal, but then it's going to be rolling into this Purva Bhadrapad energy, which is a complete, like, again, flame ashes type of energy. So unfortunately, I don't think we're quite done with this whole eclipse cycle, energy that we're feeling. The Lugnash or ruling planet for this whole chart is Saturn, because Saturn rules Aquarius, which again is the rising sun or the Lugna here. Saturn's in Uttar Bhadrapada, so that's the back legs of a funeral pyre. So that's also related to, again, major transformation, but at least that's not quite as destructive as Purva Bhadrapada, the nakshatra before it, because at that point there's this notion of surrender or transcendence or um, sort of accepting, the transformation that was abrupt and destructive. And now it's like, okay, now what do we do about it? Where do we go from here? It can bring this sort of like peace or order to the chaos that's just occurred. Saturn is a very physical planet. It represents physical things, including land. But also, property in general. And Saturn, though, is like a slow-moving planet. It's the slowest of all these planets. It takes 29 years for Saturn to go around the whole zodiac. So, at least Saturn, the ruling planet for this chart, is in a second house, which is House of Gains. So even though there's some pretty hardcore, intense transformation going on here, it looks like that there's actually gains to be had overall. Okay, so one example, again, going back to that artificial intelligence company, Anthropic is their name. So they were blacklisted, dismissed and blacklisted by the Defense Department of the United States, which seems like a humongous deal. But apparently within the next few days, their individual people were downloading their app. So the people recognized that they were very serious, clearly very serious about their philosophy of maintaining safety with AI, because they didn't want to let go of the safeties that would potentially allow general surveillance of anybody in the world. And also, it'd be like completely autonomous, weapons could be allowed with that, it's like with no human oversight or control. And those are I think, two big sticking points for Anthropic not complying with the Department of War. But, um, people voted with their app downloading. So, in a way, it kind of strengthened the strong philosophy of Anthropic. And it looks like, at least on the grassroots level, they're gaining from this fallout, at least what seemed like a major fallout. Um, So the other thing is Saturn, again, the ruling planet, is in the House of Gains. Venus is in the House of Gains. Currently, it's also in Purva Phalguni, so Venus is toast, but Venus is exalted in the second house of Pisces here. So Venus is the compassion, social grace point. So right now, we're sort of shaking off the dust of this big hit here. But Venus will get stronger and in better situation and shape to, again, second house also represents a speech to potentially go back into negotiations. Now, that's probably not going to be right away because in the next week or so, Venus is going to cross Saturn. And so they're going to get into planetary war where they're both going to be destabilized. But after that, slowly, Venus should be getting stronger in terms of the natural benefic things it represents over the course of most of March. But the other thing is that these other planets that are in the mix of this big fight here, they're also slowly going to be rolling into Pisces out of the line of fire and into the second house of gains, at least for the Aquarius person. Okay, so, or the Aquarius house, whatever that is. So Sun is going to roll into Pisces, I think it's the 14th of March. And then Mars towards the end of March, I want to say the 25th. I don't know if that's exactly correct. And then Mercury, I believe, is going to be like the first week of April. So one by one, you're going to get like more and more planets. The stellium is basically, to a large extent, going to shift into Pisces. So for the Aquarius person, they might really be feeling the squeeze right now. But over the course of the month, they're going to see how this whole, episode, dramatic episode, is actually benefiting them. In contrast, okay, all these planets moving into the Pisces house here, this is the 8th house for the Leo person, the partners of the Aquarius person. So whereas all these planets are going to move through the second house of gains for Aquarius, they're going to move through the 8th house of long-term, deep, chronic problems for the Leo person. So again, it might seem like Leo's sort of um, more powerful in this fight, but because of the benefic influences on Aquarius, and then the planet shifting into the second house from Aquarius, actually in the Aquarius within the next month or so is going to start to see that this is actually a kind of a blessing in disguise. However, and then on the flip side, the Leo person or entity is going to be like, wow, I really, you know, uh, lost a lot here. There are going to be chronic problems, yeah. So, all is not lost, even though it looks pretty and probably feels very dire here. This Lagnisha, again, ruling planet Saturn, has gone to the second house. The other thing is the second house is an artistana, so it's a house about material wealth. So again, it's a house of gains, and also it's a house of family and inner circle. So while there was a lot of, again, drama and skirmish going on here, it's going to draw more people closer to the Aquarius side of things, or person, or entity. Yeah. Um, so, again, for the next week or so, there's maybe going to be a loss and regain, instability of diplomacy with the inner circle. And again, with Leo, across the Aquarius Leo line here. Oh, I wrote it down here. So Sun joins Pisces, Saturn and Venus and Pisces are on March 14th. So this might be a possible time, to negotiate and gain from that. The other thing about March 14th, I believe it's March 6th, March 6th or March 9th, Saturn is going combust. So that's going to be interesting in two different ways. One, it can, when a planet goes combust, it means it's so close to the sun you can't see it in your eyes with your eyes anymore. And so materially, like the experience of that though is that the external manifestations of a planet are not seen. And Saturn is about obstacles, delays, material problems, logistical, operational issues. So there might be some barriers that are reduced, external barriers that are reduced, but internally, during combustion, the inner aspects of that planet can be more felt. So Saturn represents anxiety, doubt, fear, depression, skepticism, so it might internally, those things might increase, and Saturn's going to be combust for about a month. From again, I think it's March 6th to April 6th, or March 9th to April 6th, something like that. It's about a month. So that may reduce the obstacles to some kind of, again, negotiation, because Saturn, Venus, and Sun are going to be in the second houses from both Leo and Aquarius. But again, Venus is exalted in Pisces, so Venus is exalted in the second house for Aquarius, which is a great, better position than Venus is going to be debilitated in the second house for the Leo person through aspect. So again, the Aquarius side here is potentially much more to gain. Okay. Yeah, so there might be a chance at that point to start negotiations. The only thing, though, is again, this Mercury is the last planet to move out of here, and again, that's not going to be till the first week of April or so. So I don't think we're out of the woods here, but at least things might, especially once Sun moves out of here, that may cool things down, but then it's going to be Mars, Mercury, Rahu. That's still pretty intense. And then again, Mars is going to roll through Purva Phalguni. So that might be more destructions generally, or it might be actually deconstructing this whole, fighting lineup here. Probably both. It's sort of the last hurrah, almost like the fireworks show where it's like at the end they have the big finale where it's like boom, 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 and then it's all over. It might kind of be like that. Yeah, so again, things are pretty intense, but already starting to see that in this, argument here, it looks like, even though initially the Leo side seems stronger, the Aquarius side seems like it has more to gain and will be gaining more, especially because it's functioning from this fixed idea philosophy, in this Jupiter, aspecting all of this. So at least whatever this idealism is that the Aquarius side has, there's some benefic influence. The other thing is that Purva Bhadrapada, that's not all bad either. Purva Bhadrapada, the star of Purva Bhadrapada is Jupiter. So especially, these planets, even though they're in Purva Bhadrapada, Jupiter is a spiritual planet. It's aspecting there, and then the star of Purva Bhadrapada is Jupiter. So it may seem subtle or maybe even completely unnoticeable at the time because of all this, massive ambition and fighting and stuff like that. But there's clearly a spiritual element to the transition, sticking to this high-minded attitude for the Aquarius side is actually going to be beneficial. Kind of like, again, Anthropic and the Department of Defense or War. So, yeah. Okay, so on this slide, what are some other energies that are influencing things and how? Well, the day and hour lord for this particular moment in time are both Mars. So again, that's going to be fighting leadership, military, that doesn't help the fighting issue at all. Let's just put it that way. The Sha period or planetary period, and that's when certain planets are you can consider more active or influential at a given time. We've got Venus, Rahu, and Jupiter. So that's at least we've got a couple of natural benefics in there, Venus and Jupiter, even though Venus is kind of out of the mix here, and Jupiter, Jupiter's pretty important. And Rahu. So Venus and Jupiter are the two counseling planets. Venus is the mundane counselor, Jupiter is the spiritual counselor, and they're the diplomacy planet. So, and Rahu is ambition, but again, Rahu is in the middle of all this like fiery Sun, Mars management, leadership energy. So trying to bring some diplomacy or counseling to an unusual, ambitious leadership situation. The other thing is Venus and Jupiter, again, we're talking about a lot of money here. Again, Jupiter's the ruler of the second house of assets and the 11th house of income, and Venus is also a financial planet and it's exalted in the second house. So there's a lot of money related to whatever this fight is here. Now, this planetary period is switching from Venus, Rahu, Jupiter to Venus, Rahu, Saturn, March 7th. So Jupiter, so the sub period of Jupiter in the first of Sha is shifting to Saturn. So that may be Jupiter's optimism, balance, fairness, justice, law, optimism, and Saturn is the opposite. Saturn is practical, delays, obstacles, doubt, fear. So, but the thing is, again, March 7th or so, Saturn's going combust. So this may be more internal fears, doubts going on rather than truly like physical obstacles going on. But there's a shift from being more of an optimistic philosophical point of view to being more pragmatic because Jupiter is the optimist and Saturn is very much the, nuts and bolts type of energy, physical energy. Okay. Also in this chart, we have Chidra grahas, which are planets of vulnerability. These can indicate planets that are kind of a sensitive point, sticking point, an Achilles heel, any of those kind of concepts fits with Chidra grahas. So we have Moon, Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury. So those are all the potentially benefic planets. So Jupiter and Venus, again, counseling, advice, goodness, fairness, diplomacy, compassion. Moon and Mercury, those are the two mind planets, the emotional mind, the analytical mind. Moon and Mercury, I meant if I said Moon and Venus. Those are the two mind planets, Moon and Mercury. Then Moon and Venus are the two emotional planets. So you can see the sticking points here, which is not too surprising given this intensity on the 1-7 axis. Mind and emotions, balancing, those, getting a grip on those. Public ideas, counseling, because this is also freaking out the public. This is not just a private event anymore because we've got Moon there. Moon represents public. So whatever this fight is, it's spilling out into this public sphere. But looks like there's also like a kind of a poker face energy here. Because Moon is eclipsed. Moon is an emotional planet. Venus is off to the side. Yeah, people really aren't showing their emotions here. They're very kind of steely, looking at this. Vulnerability is literally like showing what you really feel and what you really think. This is about just, again, putting on your poker face, game face to work through this and not show your weaknesses, literally. So then we have money-related planets. So the Yogi is a planet representing wealth, and that's Rahu. So, that's nice that Rahu, again, that's on the Aquarius side. So that's another indication that the Aquarius side of this skirmish is going to basically, over time, it might not look like it on the surface because, again, this is a Rahu and Ketu, right? The eclipse. So Rahu and Ketu, they veil and unveil things. So again, on the surface, it might look like the Aquarius side is just down and out, but again, slowly over time, especially over the course of the next month, you'll see that they actually end up winning. But also in terms of money here. Then the Yogi Abhiyogi, Abhiyogi duplicate Yogi, which one is lack of wealth, the other is wealth. So it's a mixed bag here with Venus. So again, Venus is clearly in a financial position because it indicates finances. It's in the second house, it's exalted. But again, it's about to go into war with Saturn. Sun is going to join there, and then Mars and Mercury. So I think Venus might be out of there though by the time Mercury, definitely before Mercury gets there, maybe before Mars, or it might be right around the time that Mars gets there. But Venus has to work with that malefic energy, at least two, Saturn and Sun, for a while, for the last half of March. So Venus is not out of the woods. Rahu, again, material gains through ambitions potentially, but there can also be versus like losses of relationships and diplomacy here because of the indications of Venus. The other thing with especially a lunar eclipse is that that's going to bring a lot of like an emotional contagion type of energy related to emotions. Because Rahu and Ketu on their own can signal like mental health issues. But then you've got Moon, which is eclipsed. That's going to weaken the Moon, which is, again, public sentiment. And then Mercury's there. So the two mind planets are involved here. The other thing about what I've mentioned about any kind of eclipse is that essentially you're also dealing with generational issues. You can think about it also as like karma, because the four planets you need to line up for an eclipse are the Sun, the Moon, Rahu, and Ketu. Sun represents father, Moon represents mother, Rahu represents maternal grandparents, and Ketu represents paternal grandparents. So this is also like in that way like a you know uh, pretty deep in terms of its effects for generations, both ancestors and descendants in both directions of time. In terms of the lineage. So whatever this skirmish or whatever is, there are going to be long-term repercussions and from it, whether good or bad, depending on your perspective, I suppose. Okay, so what else do we have here? So, um, clearly this is all about relationship issues because we've got all these planets on the 1-7 axis of self and others. So let's look at, we've mostly been focusing on the first house, so let's look a little bit more in the seventh house. The seventh Lord, again, it's a bhavat bhavam, recently eclipsed sun. So that also makes the sun a bit weakened, even though the sun is aspecting its own house, which brings power and strength. But that can essentially mean that there's an instability of leadership on the Leo side. And also that the Lord of the Leo house is gone to the seventh house. So it's like following, it's like pursuing the Aquarius, kind of on the more attack side, I would say. Besides that, Mars and Ketu in the Leo, it's going to be like a very explosive type of energy again on the Leo side. Um, K2 and Moon are in Purva Phalguni, so that's a star of Venus. So there is at least there is that benefic influence. At least those two planets are in the star of Venus, a compassion diplomacy planet. But I would say that there's a loss of public peace here, overall with all these malefics on the 1-7 axis. The other thing about this, is that Aquarius and Leo are both fixed signs. So both sides are going to be stubborn, unbending, unrelenting. So, it's going to be almost like a game of chicken, like who's going to give first type of thing. But this might also mean that it's hard to really find a solution or compromise, of any kind. 1-7, both the first and seventh house, both filled with natural malefics. The other thing is that all these natural malefics are on the cornerstones of relationships. So the lugna. So when we look at sinister compatibility, we look at the lugna, rising sign, sun, and moon. So all these malefics are on all three. So these are going to be extreme relationship dynamics that are really like off the hook and going haywire. And also the 1-7, Lord synastry, not just house synastry, but they're in an adversarial position because of the relative position of the first Lord, which is Saturn, and the seventh Lord, which is Sun. So that doesn't help. Um, again, at least the first house has an aspect of the natural benefic Jupiter. And also the star, even though Purva Phalguni is, again, the funeral pyre energy and things blowing up or turning to ash, at least the star of that is Jupiter. So there is like whatever this fight is going on at least the Aquarius side, there's something about inspired philosophical action on the Aquarius side. Okay. Whereas the Venus side, not the Venus side, the Leo side, not really. Again, at least Moon and K2 are in Venus, and Venus is in exaltation sign at this particular moment. But Venus is unstable because it's in Purva Phalguni and it's about to go into war with Saturn. So, yeah, that's pretty tough. Also, K2 at the end of March is moving out of Purva Phalguni. Purva Phalguni, which is where Moon and Ketu are, and it's moving into Maga, which is its own star. So Ketu is going to get stronger. So things might get really wild, even more wild and wacky, actually, at the end of the month. And Ketu should be in that. I think Ketu is going to be in Maga from the end of March to the end of November. Don't quote me on that, but it's going to be about 6 months of that kind of, which Ketu is going to be really, and Ketu is like, it's a south node of the moon. It's like Mars, erratic, fighting, separationist, but even more wild and woolly. Um, and again, seventh house really doesn't have much of a benefic influence. The Karaka's Venus, that's with Saturn on the 2-8 axis. So also Saturn is going to suppress Venus, um, which again is the social grace diplomacy planet. So that's going to be that energy is on the 2-8 axis, or the second house from both of these. Those energies are in the second house from both Aquarius and Leo. But again, even worse for the Leo side because Venus is debilitated in Virgo in their second house. So this can be suppressing talk and thought, at least for a while here, probably at least another week until Venus crosses Saturn. But again, slowly over the next month, I think the Aquarius side is going to see how there are benefits to, this tumultuous time, whereas Leo is going to see losses. Okay, so now in the next two slides, I was going to look at the amshas or subzodiacs for the eclipse chart, so we can get a little bit more detail and information, especially about timing. So if you're not familiar, these are subzodiacs, amshas, subdivisional charts, all different names for the same thing. These are derived by slicing and dicing up the main chart into smaller pieces to get these subcharts. In Western astrology, I think they're called harmonic charts. So these are mostly used for timing, although you can get more detail. So because we're looking at timing at the top of the slide, I've reminded you about the Dasha period. These are the planetary planets that are more active or influential at the current time, and then how they're shifting March 7th. So we're moving from Venus, Rahu, Jupiter to Venus, Rahu, Saturn. And I've circled those planets in these charts so that we can see like in what direction things are moving. Okay. So on this slide, I have the Navamsha D9 for partnerships, the Jishamsha D10 for career and reputation, and the Ekadamsha D11 for income and support. So in the D9, Saturn, of these different planets, Saturn is not well placed. Venus and Jupiter are in Kendra. So there's a core diplomacy. The Kendras are the four houses in the middle. There's a core diplomacy for the native of the Aquarius eclipse chart related to diplomacy. And again, that's not too surprising given that the Aquarius side had that Jupiterian influence by aspect, even though there are again problems, potentially. Also, let's see, Moon is with two natural malefics. That's going to give, and there are two soul enemies. So, public emotional difficulty leadership. Like Saturn is there, Sun is there. So, difficulty, this might even be public protesting or, outrage related to leadership issues. Venus is pretty strong. It's got directional strength in this chart, and it's on the 4-10 axis. So, past and future diplomatic action. So, again, it looks like the Aquarius side, and also Rahu is Swa and the 11th house of clubs, group, and society. So it looks like the Aquarius person is going to win people over, you know, uh, the, you know, generally, but there's going to be this mass kind of distaste or difficulty with leadership. Um, and not necessarily the leadership of Aquarius, but yeah. So then the Dashamsha D10 for Korean reputation. Venus is not well placed. Also, Moon is not well placed. So, again, there might be some emotional trouble. Also, Venus is in the third house, indicating losses and, change and endings. It is aspected by its dispositor Mars, so that'll make it a little bit stronger. So, this might actually be potentially a good, deep transformational change overall. Saturn and Jupiter are both Swa, so this could again bring religious, spiritual, philosophical strength in lineage as well as advisement. So again, I think this could potentially bring, like the Aquarius side, a very noble, philosophical reputation. Venus is also aspecting its own house in the ninth. So again, this is going to bring diplomacy, grounded diplomatic leadership to the enterprise, if this is an enterprise. Then the Ekadamsha D11 for income and support. All the grahas are well placed. Saturn is Swa. It's in Parivartana. Wait a minute, hold on. There's a Parivartana between Mars and exalted Rahu here. So this is going to be strong ambition, industrial tech partners going on here. Venus is aspecting its own house with let me back up. Venus is in the ninth house of authority with an exalted sun, aspects of debilitated Saturn and Moon. So again, there's me exaggerated emotions regarding leadership and authority here. So again, mostly what I'm saying here is that there is this emotional, mental swaying, because of the intensity going on here. But you can also see that as we're switching from the Jupiter subperiod to the Saturn subperiod, we're going from more of a philosophical kind of inspired action to pragmatic nuts and bolts. How do we make this work in the real world? So there's that going on. Okay, so on this slide, I have health shows because again, there seemed like there was acute mental emotional stress, social stress going on here. So we have at the top the Tajik Shashtamsha D6 for acute issues, the Tajik Ashtamamsha D8 for chronic issues, then the Bamsha D27 for strength and resilience. So at the top here, we have a Swa Venus that's not well placed, but again, you keep seeing in these subcharts, Venus is not well placed, but it's in the third house typically, which is a place of change and endings. And usually, and Venus has been strong, or at least aspecting its own house. So, um, again, that's emotional issues, but there's also strength. So, And Venus also represents relationships. So again, social issues causing stress, is what we're seeing over and over again. And so far, 3 times Venus has been in the third house of changes and endings, but also neighbors and friends. So again, just even that, you can see that there's support going on despite the challenges. Yeah. Saturn aspects Jupiter, so there can be obstacles and slowness to balancing and justice coming forward. Rahu's in the 11th house of clubs, group, society, and income again. So, excuse me, there's ambition towards, again, drawing in groups, or there will be a natural tendency for groups to be drawn into this. Then the D8 for chronic issues. Venus is, in the third house, not well placed. Let's see. And Jupiter's also not well placed, so and it's debilitated. So, although it is Bunga because it's with its the exalted planet in Capricorn and the but Venus and Jupiter, they're in the third and eighth houses here, which is again changes and endings. So issues with advice and diplomacy in a chronic way, despite some attempts. But you can see even in the D6, Venus is not well placed and Jupiter is slowed down by Saturn. So there can be again problems with diplomacy, which reiterates, the main chart here. Um, Saturn's exalted, and the fifth house is again practical advice. So again, this might be like kind of taking the emotional, things down a notch emotionally, and just being very pragmatic and very like concrete about the actions, rather than not that they can't be aspirational, inspirational, or compassionate, but again, um, it might just be that it's got to take, things one step at a time and put one block in place, to rebuild to get to the next point. Let's see, Rahu is and then the dispositor of Rahu is this debilitated Bunga Jupiter. So this can be ambition that's thwarted, like whatever ambitious track um, was being taken. It's like somebody like kicked over your sandcastle type of energy. The Aquarius person like is building this castle in the sky, and that's like, the Leo person comes and like kicks it over. Then the Bamcha D27 for strength and resilience. Well, we have an exalted Rahu and Saturn are both not well placed. So issues with ambitious enemies because they're in the third house of friends, neighbors, and Rahu's in the sixth house of enemies. Also, this could be related to structure and property. We have two parivartanas in this chart. So we have Saturn and Sun. So a lot of obstacles, a lot of leadership, and also Jupiter and Mars. So this is also like legal stuff and fighting. And these 4 planets are in 3, 9, 10, 11. So this is the friends, neighbors, siblings. What else? 9 is authority, 10 is day-to-day activity, and 11 is like groups again. So friends, neighbors, relationships, authority, legal, fighting. So again, it seems like, friends and social. Looks like friends are going to step in to help deal with this pretty big fight going on here. Saturn is aspecting its own house in the ninth. So again, there's can be strength through practical authority here. So again, we keep seeing that when things switch to Saturn, by the end of the week here, it's going to be like just again taking things down a notch and being very practical and deliberate about steps that are taken. But in all the subzodiacs, Venus and Moon are in negative houses with natural malefics or soul enemies, so a lot of emotional relationship issues. Saturn, the subperiod will bring pragmatism. And again, most of the grahas, when I've circled them, are related to third, seventh, ninth, and 11th houses. So a lot of social support and authoritative, a lot of social support related to authoritative, issues with authority. Yes, I guess what I would say there. Okay, so now on to Iran's chart. So why was I even looking at Iran? Well, I had finished up my March Transits 2026 video, posted that Friday, so what, 3 days ago. And in that video, I was discussing how the energies of the month of March really look like there was signaling a lot of trouble or even endings of leadership. So, and then I started this eclipse video, and then within a few hours in the news, I saw that U.S. and Israel had bombed Iran. So I was like, well, let me just sort of curious out of about Iran. I looked at their national chart, and probably not surprising, their national chart is very similar to the current sky pattern. And if you've seen any of my videos, you know I like to work with charts that are similar to the current sky pattern, so that we get more kind of concretized uh, indications or manifestations of these astrological energies. Otherwise, I think it ends up being very abstract and hard to kind of grapple with. But yeah, so let's take a look at what they got going on here. Okay, so this is the sun chart or surya lugna for Iran, because I don't have an exact birth time. Okay, but the date is December 3rd, 1979, in the evening. So that's the closest I got to any kind of time. So I set this, the way I got this chart was I set the time for 6 p.m., and this is in Tehran, Iran. And then I oriented the chart to the sun at the top to get a sun chart for 6 p.m. Okay. So I figured that's the closest we could get. So on this day, in the evening, there was an announcement that um, there was a new constitution that was put into place based on a referendum that happened over the 2nd and 3rd of December. So from this referendum, pretty amazing numbers here, 99.5% of voters, and again, I think these are mostly male voters over the age of, I forget, I confused this. There was another referendum earlier in the year, and there were some issues potentially with the first referendum. But anyway, these are all male voters here. Um, but they agreed to accept this new constitutional document. And essentially, what this constitutional document did is it created this new constitution, but it moved Iran into specifically an Islamic republic. Okay, so it was a religious based republic. Okay, so first of all, why don't you give the chart a look see and see what you see, and maybe you can tell me how this may or may not be related to the current sky pattern based on what we just talked about, given the eclipse chart. Okay, well, first off, what should be fairly obvious is that, look, we've got Ketu and Rahu on the Leo Aquarius axis again. Ketu and Rahu are not exactly the same, but they have a lot of similarities. So this is actually the first big noticeable thing about this chart, especially given the current eclipse time and season. Okay. Also, we've got a Pravraja Yoga, okay, with Jupiter and Mars. So we're getting this Jupiter-Mars-Rahu combination again. Okay, this time on more the Leo side. Okay, but Jupiter and Mars are aspecting K2 in Aquarius. Okay. So the focus here, Jupiter and Mars again. I mentioned gives like a legal combination. Jupiter's law and Mars is fighting, so or in initiation as well, and Rahu's ambition. So there's some ambition focusing on legal leadership. Mars again is the CEO. Okay, so and commander in chief of the army. So yeah, so this is a focus on, and again, this is in the 10th house of day-to-day activity. So this is not just like creating a legal document, which it is, but the other thing is what this document is also doing is changing legally the day-to-day actions of individuals' lives in terms of following the Islamic or Shia law, religious law. Okay, so this is like, and there's a big drive to do this. Okay, so that's again, this is part of the gestalt, for the chart and the country. do we see here? Well, we've got a parivartana exchange of houses between Sun and Mars. Mars is in a sign of Leo, which is ruled by the Sun, and Sun is in a sign of Mars, which is Scorpio here. So essentially, you can exchange Sun and Mars. So now what do you get? Now you've got Sun, Mars, Rahu, Jupiter, in Leo. So Sun is in Leo, like it's aspect, basically, like right now, Sun is in Aquarius, aspecting Leo. And you have Jupiter, Mars, and Sun aspecting Aquarius. So on the Aquarius side, you have Sun, Mars, Jupiter, K2. I mean, that's almost exactly the same as a current eclipse pattern. I mean, that's pretty wild. Yeah. And Sun and Mars, I mean, these are the two leadership planets. And now, because of the Parivartana, they're all over the chart and they're in Sambandha. So they're almost like a conjoined, energy. So this is like, again, like bringing the president and commander in chief is the same. It's like president, CEO slash CEO, like people who have that, dual title. They're in charge of everything. Not just Sun can be, president or king can be more of a symbolic type of leadership, and Mars is the apparitional one. But it's all combined here. The other thing is that Sun and Mars are going to be all over this chart, which is leadership, but also they're fiery planets. So this can be a lot of fighting as well. Okay, so we got that going on. What else do we have here? Okay, so a lot of lines here. So first off, again, this is a sun rising chart, Surya Lugna. We've got Scorpio at the top, or Vrishika, and this is a fixed water sign. Okay, now remember, if you've noticed, I've been saying fixed quite a bit because Leo is a fixed fire sign, Aquarius is a fixed air sign, and now the sun chart for Iran is a fixed water sign. So a lot of fixed energies. So again, stubbornness, holding the line, unbending, uncompromising. There's a lot of energies going on, not just in the eclipse chart, but then we're already seeing some of that in the Iran chart as well. Okay. Sun is in Jesta. Jesta is symbolized, that nakshatra is symbolized by a talisman, so there's a protective energy. And especially with Sun in Jesta, this is a protective government or authority. There's also Mars aspecting the Lugna here. Also, it's there by Parivartana in exchange with Sun, and Mars is strong because it's got Digbala, directional strength. And Mars is in the nakshatra Maga. Maga is symbolized by a throne, so again, leadership energy. Maga is specifically leadership related to tradition and ancestors, because Maga is related to Regulus, the star that's part of Leo, that constellation. In an Indian culture, Maga, that part of the sky, is thought to be the place where our ancestors reside. So especially when I see important placements in somebody's chart related to Maga, they tend to be somebody who adheres to tradition. And we've got Mars and Rahu both in Maga. So there's this ambitious drive to have a leadership, and Jupiter is law, and also spirituality. There's an ambitious drive to, again, change the day-to-day activities into ones that are aligned with spiritual tradition and ancestry. So again, before this new constitution in December 1979 took place, there was a previous constitution that was more based on European law and tradition, but it did include the Islamic law. And that's essentially what was abandoned, and so the Khamenei at that time uh, shifted things in a whole new, more religiously focused direction for the whole country. Okay, so yeah, and then what do we have here? So also the Sun and Lugna here, they're aspected by Saturn. Saturn's in Purva Phalguni. Saturn's in the 11th house of clubs, group, society. So Saturn's history, and this is in Virgo, which is an ordering type of energy. But Saturn can be suppression. So this can be suppression of social groups and enjoyment because of a certain purpose. And again, it's a religious purpose here. But the Lord of this 11th house has gone to the 12th house of losses and expenditure. So there can be losses due to groups and money because of this sort of social suppression that's going on here, yeah, in the chart. Um, there's an aspect of Rahu. Rahu's also in Maga, that ancestor leadership energy. Let's see. Well, I'm just looking at why I put aspect. I think I need to change the aspect. Anyway, Rahu's there again. This is going to bring ambition to, again, maintaining previous ancestral laws and government. So at least there is a Jupiterian benefic energy on the Leo house. And, well, actually both, because Jupiter aspects into Aquarius as well. So at least in this chart, Iran chart, there's a Jupiterian influence on both the Leo and Aquarius side, unlike the current eclipse side. Okay. But especially Jupiter and Mars can bring enthusiasm, and Rahu can bring like almost like an obsessive compulsive energy. So especially this Jupiter Mars Rahu combination can bring, I would think, religious or spiritual zealousness um, regarding, like, again, following and maintaining the laws of ancestors is what I'm seeing in this chart. The other thing is that, again, this lineup of the eclipse with the eclipse happening on the Aquarius Leo axis with these specific planets is almost the same. I mean, you don't have Mercury involved, but otherwise it's pretty close. Basically, this is going to reactivate, the Iranian eclipse chart. I mean, the Iranian national chart. So you're going to get this like Sun and Mars at the top with Saturn. You're going to get Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Rahu in Leo. Leo is a stage. It's also high level government. So, this is going to go all the way to the top. And also it's, affecting a fourth house here is Aquarius. Leo is a 10th house. So fourth house is past, Leo is future. Yeah. So that in and of itself as well, indicates like generational change. And the current Dasha for Iran is Jupiter Rahu. So we're going to get, again, that's going to activate even more like this Jupiter Rahu mix, on the Aquarius Leo axis for the country. But we're at the end, or not we, Iran's at the end of its Jupiter Mahadasha main planetary period, and it's actually transitioning into Saturn. So Saturn is going to bring obstacles, delays, problems to Sun, government, the potential lugna here, which is the physicality of the country. Also, Saturn is in the 11th house of groups, and Saturn's aspecting the 8th house of deep psychology. So it's going to bring sadness, anxiety, doubt, fear, So again, we don't have an exact birth time here, but from 6 p.m. until 12 p.m., that makes the Dasha period for Iran either the end of Jupiter, Rahu, or the beginning of Saturn. Either way, it's kind of a transition period, so it's an overlap anyway. But we're going from more of like a ambitious, optimistic time to Saturn, like delays, obstacles, pessimism, fear. Okay. And trouble with the whole gestalt of the government and leadership, because Saturn's going to be on both Sun and Mars because of the Parivartan exchange of houses. The 5th house of kids / children / future generations, deep psychology in the 8th house, groups in the 11th house, and Saturn is on the 11th house of income and also the 8th house of other people's money. So there's money involved with this as well. But you can see where this lineup is being activated for the country in almost a very similar way to the current eclipse. Okay, so let's look at the other planets because, again, this is an intense combination here with Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Rahu, Saturn, Ketu. But look at this Mercury and Venus and Moon, which are benefic planets, are not really in the mix here, kind of like the eclipse chart. Okay, so let's talk about those. So the second and seventh lord. So the second house is, second and seventh lord. 12th house, I meant 12th house, and the 7th house lord is Venus, okay, which is that compassion, diplomacy planet. Let me just change that before I forget. Okay, so I fix that. So the Venus is the lord of the 7th house of partnerships, and it's also the lord of the 12th house of expenditures and losses, okay? And again, Venus is the planet representing the 7th house and the lord of the 7th house, okay? So especially in this kind of chart, Venus is even more important for assessing the 7th house, which is all about partnerships. Now, at least for Iran, 7th house looks pretty good because we have an exalted moon there in Rohini, at least at this time of the day. That's shifted. Moon was in Kritika up until 8:42 a.m. So Kritika is a fighting, nurturing planet. So there was some fighting going on, and then I guess once the day hit, more or less, Moon shifted into this much more attractive, fertile, creative, lovely type of energy. Rohini is considered to be the most attractive kind of nakshatra of the 27. So that's pretty nice. And the moon there is there. So this is going to be like a grounded, fertile public. Okay. This is like almost like an enclave type of energy, which is essentially part of what Iran was attempting to create is they wanted to create like a separate society that was very kind of insular, protective of its, people, who subscribe to the same ideas and values and philosophy. The other thing is the moon, this exalted moon, is the lord of the 9th house of authority. So this is bringing a lot of, like, I would say, peace to people and the government, at least in the mind. The day-to-day actions are pretty intense, but at least emotionally at this time, there seems to be some peace, cultivated here. But Venus, the thing about Venus, so I don't think it's all on, sunshine and unicorns though, because Venus is in a nakshatra called Mula. Mula is symbolized by a bunch of roots tied together, and the god deity associated, at least Hindu or Indian deity associated with Mula, is the goddess of death and destruction. And again, the Karaka and the lord of the 7th house has gone 8 houses away in this destruction energy nakshatra. So, um, even though in this particular moment, and the moon moves fast because every day the moon's in a different nakshatra, at this particular moment, it was kind of a ideal situation to actually have this pass through the public. Again, 99.5% agreed. I mean, frankly, I don't know if those numbers are realistic. I mean, there were issues with the referendum that happened in April. Like they had color coded ballots and they changed the age that people could vote for. They dropped it from like 18 to 16. So they were almost sort of padding the box, it seemed like. But anyway, that's another issue. But at least for this moment in time, the fact that Moon is in Rohini is very amenable to having this constitutional, new law passed by the public. I'm happy about it. Okay. Um, but there's destructive issues here. The other thing is Venus represents women, and it's in Mula in the 2nd house. So, 2nd house is speech. So this could be a loss of female speech and voice, and women weren't allowed to vote in this referendum. Okay. So, but I would also say that this exalted moon, which also represents the 9th house of authority, this is also creating like a diplomatic society or republic. Okay. Also, partners are going to be like-minded, you know, um, or hopefully like-minded. But again, there can be some destructive elements because of the Venus. Let's see. And again, this might also the partners might also be involved because of financial assets that they have. Because again, Venus, a financial planet in the 2nd house, can create assets, and the 8th house from the 2nd is going to be other people's money. So Then we've got Ketu here in Shatabi. So instead of Rahu in Shatabi, that 100 healers nakshatra, we've got Ketu, so aspected by Jupiter, Mars, Sun. Again, Ketu and Mars together bring an explosive energy. In the fourth house is the past, so explosive end of past regime. So this is the end of the Pahlavi dynasty and also the monarchy that had been ruling. The Pahlavi dynasty, I think, was there for a number of decades, but the monarchy, I believe a monarchy was in charge of Persia/Asia or Persia/Iran for like 2,500 years. I mean, it was ancient. So there was the end of that, the destruction end of that. Also, there were a bunch of boycotts that happened for both the referendum in April and this one because different political parties refused to engage. Because there were a lot of issues. Apparently, the head of the Pahlavi dynasty, I think that change happened in the 1920s or so. And a contemporary of that time was Ataturk in Turkey, who decided to take Turkey in an opposite direction of becoming more secular and dividing, church and state or mosque and state. Whereas like Iran ended up going the opposite direction. Apparently, the head of the Pahlavi dynasty was thinking or talking about going in a similar sort of secular direction, but then because of some pushback, decided not to follow through, and then Iran went the other way. But there were a lot of boycotts. So, besides the potential voting issues, operational voting issues, so which may have kind of supported this particular cause indirectly, but also shifted the course of the country because boycotting kind of solidified this direction because people weren't participating in the vote. So that's also kind of interesting. The ninth lord here, again, the exalted moon, that shifted from Kritika, that fighting golden warrior energy, to Rohini, the attractive energy. So also the ninth house is religion. So this is like a happy little enclave, public enclave of religion. And I think also this could be extend out to other countries. And Iran has been known for actually hosting different sorts of unconventional groups. So that have specifically Islamic ideals and that sort of thing. So, and that's part of why they're known as a safe haven in that regard. That's also there. It's part of this chart. Let's see. But the moon, so fighting, then attracting, nurturing partners, religious enclave, public government, all that's there. Then Mercury, but again, isn't part of this, Sun, Mars, Rahu, Jupiter, Ketu mix too much. Mercury's in Vishaka, that's victory at all costs, and Mercury's the lord of the 11th house of clubs, groups, society, and income, and it's in the 12th house of losses and expenditure, so it looks like there's loss on both those counts. Also, Mercury's the lord of the 8th house of deep psychology, so Mercury is a dual planet that's lord over two dual signs. So Virgo in the 11th house is going to bring order and even purifying of groups and societies. So I think this is even from a religious perspective of homogenizing society that way. But there's and doing that at any cost. So there were groups that were lost or again not included. And also again, that decision to maintain religious purity might have affected them financially in terms of income available to them or development. The other thing is that these other planets that seem sort of on the fringe are actually doing quite a lot. Like this Venus and Mercury on those two benefic planets on natural benefics on either side of the sun rising chart here. That creates what we call a Shibkartra yoga, or positive or good scissors yoga. And what that does is it cuts through obstacles. So when somebody has that in their chart, it's almost like an open sesame. Like no matter what kind of obstacles come up, they seem to be able to override them. Whereas some people have a pop kartra yoga where they have natural malefics on either side of the lugna, in which case, like it creates obstacle after obstacle that they constantly have to work through. Um, what also helps in terms of this actually getting past this day, so moon is in Rohini, that's very helpful. The sun was in Anuradha until 4:12 a.m. Anuradha is all about victory through alliances. So especially with sun and moon in those like very, Rohini and Anuradha, that's part, and this, Shubh yoga around the sun, that's part of how this all happened, like went through. I mean, there could have been another like coup. There was a coup. That's how the Pahlavi dynasty ended, was there was a coup there. So that could have happened, but it's all worked out, on this particular day. So there was a lot of support and ease on this particular day at this time, especially, in the evening of the 3rd of December. So, yeah, so the 1907 Constitution, oh, that's when it was, the last constitution for Iran was 1907, based on European law, not, Shia law or Islamic law. And even when this constitution was accepted by the referendum, I think the Khamenei at that time said, now this is a government of God. So I imagine people want to know, when things might get better, because things are pretty dire, I think, for Iran. I think part of what we need to look at here is when is this conglomeration of Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Mercury, Rahu, Ketu on the Leo Aquarius axis, when is that dissolving? And that will dissolve more, at least acutely, at the beginning of April. So I don't think we're out of the woods because this is a pretty tight mix here. The other date that I think is going to be important is August 2026. Because Rahu, even with these other planets in the Pravraja Yoga, moving out of Aquarius and, not reflecting on Leo anymore, it's going to cool down, but Rahu is still going to be in that shot to be shot energy. There's still going to be this ambitious, almost ego drive that's difficult to manage. But Rahu shifting from shot to be shot to Dhanishta in August or at the end of July, but then Jupiter is going to be Kamba. So Jupiter for about a month is not going to have that benefic energy on Rahu. But come, I think it's middle of August, Jupiter will be out of combustion and Rahu will be in Dhanishta. So there'll be like a setting a new rhythm, like the ambition towards setting a new rhythm, that I think is going to help. So again, I don't think this is going to be like a, unfortunately end overnight type of thing. But hopefully that gives some, at least, beginning of April and then middle of August, hopefully it looks like those might be times when they're seeing some more significant gains and development of peace and rest, kind of revitalization, reestablishing, positive rhythms, that kind of thing. Okay, so on this slide, I've got charts for two of the events that just occurred in the last few days for Iran. On the left, we have the attack on Iran by the USA and Israel. And then on the right here, we have a chart for the time that Trump announced the death of the Iranian leader. So the chart on the left here, this was these are on the same day, just different times. So in different places. So 20th of February 2026 at 8:10 a.m. in Tehran. This is when warning sirens were heard in the capital of the country. And again, you don't have to analyze too much here. We've got this massive Pravraja Yoga in the 12th house of loss and expenditures. We got, 5 planets? All this energy draining out here. And we've got Saturn at the top, obstacles, delays, chronic problems, issues, doubt, fear, anxiety. I mean, that's a pretty clear chart without even saying too much about it. It is a Pisces rising chart, so this is going to be physical with Saturn there, physical trouble overseas. Also, potentially death endings going on here. And then the 12th house, this is 5 planets. Again, this is just coming off a recent solar eclipse from the 17th of February. And you can see Sun and Mars are in the 12th house, the 2 leadership planets in the 12th house of losses. so loss of leadership. The Shah period for this chart, Saturn, Mercury. So that's pulling up Saturn, physical problems, and Mercury is in the 12th house. Mercury is like logic, but also communication, and it's the lord of 4th house of home, and it's the lord of the 7th house of partners. All that down the drain. Okay, so that's a pretty intense but very clear chart. Then the chart for Trump announcing the death of a leader. So this is at 16:47 p.m. same day, Washington D.C. So U.S. President Trump posted on Truth Social, that platform, that the Iranian leader had been killed, assassinated. What's interesting to me is this happens to be a Leo rising chart. And if you know Trump's natal birth chart at all, he's also a Leo rising. So you can actually even potentially see this as a Samaya or update chart for President Trump. Okay. But look, we've got this right at the top, we've got the Leo, right? So we've got K2 there, separationist energy with Rahu, Mars, Sun, Mercury, Venus. Mercury and Venus are in planetary war. So we've got 4 planets, the 2 leadership planets, Mars and Sun, and this unstable, funeral pyre energy of diplomacy and words, all aspecting Leo, how it's at the top here. And the Lord of the 7th house of partnerships has gone to the 8th house of long-term problems, endings. So the thing though is that, so yeah, and then this is aspected by Jupiter. So Jupiter and Mercury together will give like news. So a lot of the energy here is in the 6th house, 7th house, and 8th house, because the Dasha period is also Saturn. So again, we're picking up that Saturnian energy of endings and fear, doubt, all this kind of stuff, and Rahu, so ambition. And again, with Saturn and Rahu being the Dasha period, it's going to light up the 6th house of acute issues. The Lord of the 6th house has gone to the 8th house of chronic issues. Saturn's also the Lord of the 7th house of partnerships, personal and professional. And Rahu's in the 7th house. So you can see this is like ambition to lead, partners, news, chronic issues, endings, and death. So the thing is that Rahu's there, just so you kind of feel the energy here, like if this was an update chart for President Trump, when he got elected in, was it 2024, November 2024? Was that it? Yeah. Saturn was Swa in its own sign in the 7th house, which would bring a lot of strength to his 7th house. So Saturn in his 7th house created this really strong partnership that supported him in, getting elected into the White House. Okay. And now these partnerships are going through pretty deep chronic problems, essentially, because Saturn, the lord of his, again, 7th house and 6th house, acute problems related to partnerships are becoming chronic and deep and harder to ameliorate. And Saturn's going to be in his 8th house until February 2028. And then it's going to move into Aries, with its 9th house of authority and government, where it's debilitated. So it should be interesting because, again, Saturn's moving to Aries, its debilitation sign, about 6-8 months before the next U.S. presidential election, potentially. So, yeah. So anyway, that's the announcement, which is also pretty dire here. So let's see what else we got. I think we've got synastry next, so hold on. Okay, yes, we have synastry now. So synastry is basically compatibility, okay? Like looking at people's charts, or you could see countries here, and how are these, entities or people compatible or not, okay? So I have here the charts of the United States, Iran, and Israel, since these are the 3 countries involved, at least with the current, situation, or at least initial situation. Now there's all kinds of countries involved for various reasons, but these are the 3 sort of initial, countries. So the USA chart is on the left. The time here is July 4th, 1776, 17:10 p.m. in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Then we have the sun chart, because again, I don't have an exact birth time for Iran. This is 3rd December 1979, an evening in Tehran. And then the Israel chart, this is 14th of May 1948, 16:32 p.m. in Tel Aviv. Okay. So then basically, as a first pass at looking at synastry or compatibility, we would want to look at what we call the cornerstones of relationships. So the lugna, the sun, and the moon. Okay. So so just starting with the USA chart here. So the lugna for the USA chart is Scorpio, which is a fixed sign. Okay, so also notice that as we go through here, because again, we already know that the eclipse chart is a fixed sign, right? Aquarius at the top, and then the other side's Leo, so fixed air, fixed fire. So fixed thoughts and fixed actions. So the USA is a fixed water sign here, and the uh, rising sign has aspects of both Saturn and Rahu. Okay, so these are two malefic planets. Okay, Iran we don't know about. So how does this again correspond with Iran and Israel? Well, we don't know about Iran because we don't have an exact birth time. But Israel, this is actually adversarial, physical type of energy here. Okay. Then in terms of the sun is in Gemini, which is a dual sign, dual air sign for USA, and it's got Jupiter, so benefic energy, but then two malefic, so it's a bit mixed here. For Iran and Israel both, this positioning of sun is adversarial. Okay. Then the moon is in Aquarius, which is a fixed sign, and it's Jupiter there. So at least there's a benefic influence here. With Iran, there's going to be like a kind of a contrasting energy, so there might be issues of private and public domain, which might be like part of the religious, like, are you going to combine, religion and state, religion and politics, or are you going to separate them? So that might be that kind of issue in terms of what's private and what's public, kind of part of life. Yeah. And then with Israel, it's an adversarial position. So again, moon represents minds and emotions here. So you can see across the board with the United States related to compatibility with Iran and Israel, there's not a lot of, again, positive relationship energy here. And there's two fixed energies, the lugna, which is physical energy, and the moon, mind. So this is going to be unchanging. There's a lot of just kind of stuck, stubborn, unbending energy here. Okay. The thing that was at least Jupiter is involved with the sun and the moon and the USA chart. So that should bring some optimism. But there's also Saturn, Rahu, Saturn, Mars. Saturn, Rahu, and Saturn, those planets give more of an indirect way of operating, and Mars is more direct. So of the three charts, again, they're not, it's not compatible. The USA chart is not compatible really with, at least as a first pass here, with Iran and Israel. And they tend to be more optimistic and sometimes indirect with the way that they operate. Then, what about Iran and Israel? What's the relationship there? Well, the lugna, we don't know about Iran because we don't have an exact birth time. The sun position for Iran is in Scorpio, which is a fixed sign. So again, more stuck energy, like unbending, uncompromising kind of energy. And there's two natural malefics on the sun. So, but the thing is that Israel's position of the sun is the opposite. It's in wait. Hold on. Is it? Yeah, it's opposite. It's in Taurus there. Even though they're opposites, that still creates a strong bond. Okay. So that will still drive people to, interact with each other. Okay. But again, fixed energy and Mars and Saturn. Okay. Then the moon is in Taurus where it's exalted, but that's also a fixed sign. So again, not a lot of bending, shifting, changing here. For better or worse, you could look at it either way. And then we've got Mars again. So Mars, we've got more Martian energy on sun and moon for the Iranian chart. which will bring more of a direct confrontational type of energy as opposed to indirect, which there is Saturn there, but again, you can see there's more Saturnian Rahu energy for USA, which will be more indirect, whereas Iran will be more, direct about things. But this position of the moon is actually fairly complementary with Iran. So there's going to be a supportive, friendly energy in terms of the moon. So again, emotions. So actually, Iran and Israel have potentially a much stronger positive relationship with each other based on this so far. Okay. But again, there's a Martian influence to the way that Iran operates. So again, it's going to be a more direct confrontational way of doing things. Then if we look at Israel, the Lugna is in Libra, which is a movable air sign with K2. The sun is in Taurus, which is a fixed sign. So again, how many fixed signs? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 9, more than half out of 8, because we don't know the Lugna for Iran. So 5 out of 8. So most of these are fixed. So again, all three countries have very fixed energy. So then the moon is in Cancer, which is exalted. That's pretty nice, but Saturnian influence there. So K2 and Saturn influence the way Israel operates, which is going to be more indirect. And K2 and Saturn are more kind of distant, kind of keep their distance kind of thing. So, but what's also similar between the Iran chart and Israel's chart is Iran has moon exalted in Taurus and Rohini. Israel has moon Swa and Pusha in Cancer. So both of these are about forming like this public supportive nurturing energy enclave. Yeah, so again, these are different ways that these three countries operate. And Iran and Israel have potentially a lot more kind of cohesive energy and that sort of thing. And USA is not as, again, adversarial to both of them, but again, a lot of fixed energy. So yeah, so I was like, okay, so let's look at the leaders and see what the compatibility is there or not. So let's take a look at that. Okay, yeah, but so far it's kind of a bit strange because again, USA and Israel are working together to, attack Iran, which based on this again country synastry doesn't exactly make sense, so something else must be going on. All right, so synastry compatibility of leaders. So on the left we have the birth chart for Trump, President of the United States. We have the sun chart for Khamenei. This is the supreme leader of Iran that was just killed, assassinated. And then we have the sun chart for Netanyahu of Israel, the prime minister of Israel. So the times, for those of you who are interested in that, so Trump was born 14 June 1946, 10:54 a.m. in Jamaica, New York. And then Khamenei, 19 April 1939. I don't have a birth time, but he was born in Mashhad, Iran. And then Netanyahu was born 21st October 1949. I don't have a birth time for him. So this is for Khamenei and Netanyahu. These are both sun charts. And then he was born in Tel Aviv. I actually have a whole video where I went into deep analysis of Netanyahu's chart, if any of you are interested in that. But anyway, so let's look at the synastry here. Okay, starting with Trump. Okay, so his Lugna is in Leo, fixed again. Okay, and he's got Mars on it, so direct action. We don't know the Lugnas of Khamenei and Netanyahu, so we don't know how physically they're, compatible or not. Then Sun is in Taurus, so a fixed sign with Rahu and Jupiter. So optimistic, ambitious, but indirect. With Khamenei, the relative position of their suns, it's adversarial philosophy we got going, because Sun represents philosophy. And Netanyahu, the same. Okay, so again, you can see all the orange lining up here. Pretty adversarial to both of these guys, other leaders here. Then the moon is in Scorpio, another fixed sign with K2 and Mars. So we've got Jupiter once and Mars twice and Rahu K2. So we have indirect, direct, optimistic, confrontational, As far as the moon goes, with Khamenei, he's adversarial. With Netanyahu, it's supportive and friendly. So at least there's a little bit of that going on. Because I think, at certain times, Netanyahu and Trump have seen a little buddy. Um, but that's the only sort of kind of positive, at least initial positive relationship strand between any of these countries or leaders. I mean, at least from the USA Trump side, okay? So with Jupiter, Rahu, Ketu, and Mars, like unusual energy, mixed energy, fixed energy, also because he's like all fixed here. And again, the USA chart was 2 out of 3 of these cornerstones fixed. So not a lot of negotiation going on, compromise and negotiation going on. Then with Khamenei, the Lugna we don't know because we don't have birth time. Sun, because we already looked at Trump with Khamenei and Netanyahu, so now we have Khamenei and Netanyahu. So Sun is an opposite position to Netanyahu, which again seems not great, but it's actually a strong relationship because these are people we can learn from each other. Okay, so again, there's a fairly positive strand here of relationship dynamic that would bring Khamenei and Netanyahu together to work together. Okay. Now the moon for Khamenei is in Aries and it's Virgo for Netanyahu, so this is adversarial. So again, it looks like on the kind of for leadership, there's some positive, fairly strong positive philosophy going on between Khamenei and Netanyahu, but emotionally, most of this is pretty much going south. There's a little bit of friendly support with Netanyahu and Trump. Also, in terms of the way that these leaders operate, again, we've got K2 on the sun and moon for Khamenei. This is going to be unusual separationist type of energy. So he's going to like pull back, and like isolate, and again be, that kind of thing. And then Netanyahu, Lugna, we don't know. We don't have a birth time for him. Sun is debilitated. It's in Libra. That's a movable sign with Saturn. And then Moon is in Virgo with K2. So Saturn and K2, again, separation and also indirect type of energy going on here, and unusual as well. So, yeah, I mean, again, not seeing exactly straight lines of how USA, Israel seem like they're sort of ganging up on Iran right now based on this so far. Let's see what else we got. All right, so before I move on, is there anything else you notice about these charts here? Just take a minute here to see if there's anything else that might kind of pop out at you. And then when you're ready, move on to the next slide. So what I did notice that made more sense regarding the current situation and events going on with, the USA, Israel, and Iran. Well, check this out. All 3 of these leaders were born during an eclipse. Now, this blew my mind when I noticed this. Okay, so forget the kind of synastry, blah blah blah. I mean, this is part of synastry, but I mean, it's not usually the first swipe. Okay, Trump's chart. He was born 14 June 1946. There was a lunar eclipse on that day, and it's happening on his fixed signs, so Taurus and Scorpio. Then if we look at Khamenei's chart, he was born 19 April 1939. There was an solar eclipse that happened that day, and it's happening on his Aries Libra axis here. Then if we look at Netanyahu's chart, it may not be obvious because Sun is just past the line here of Virgo into Libra. He was born on 21st October 1949. There was a solar eclipse that happened on that day. So all 3 of these guys were born during eclipses. So these eclipses, even though they're in different houses than the current one, the lineup of Sun, Moon, Rahu, and Ketu is going to activate in their charts. Rahu and Ketu are going to strongly influence their sun, all their suns, and their moons because of that lineup. Sun is, again, philosophy. Moon is emotions. Okay? So basically, all three of these leaders are simultaneously being activated by this Rahu Ketuvian energy of strange, unusual, bizarre, maybe even like obsessive kind of compulsive type of energy, which is wild and frankly pretty mind blowing. I've never seen anything like this before. It's pretty wild. The other thing, again, I've been mentioning so far that in most of the ascendant, sun, moon, in all 7 charts, meaning the eclipse chart, all 3 country charts, all 3 leader charts, there's a lot of fixed energy, meaning unbending, non-compromising energy. So if people are going to be, kind of obsessive and pushing for their particular position of philosophy and emotional state and very disruptive internally, externally. So the Sun, Moon, Rahu, Ketu, again, Rahu and Ketu are going to influence, bring unusual separationist type moves to philosophy, government, leadership, mind, public. The other thing about, to know about eclipses is that to get an eclipse, basically you need a pretty tight alignment of Sun, Moon, Rahu, and Ketu, usually less than 9 degrees. And the closer that these planets are together, the more that increases the kind of level of influence of these malefic planets of Rahu and Ketu. So the tighter degrees that you get with Rahu and Ketu with these cornerstones like ascendant, sun, moon, the more influence Rahu and Ketu are going to have. It's going to make things even more wild and crazy. So I think this, if of all the things I've looked at, the fact that all 3 of these leaders were born during eclipses and essentially are being activated with higher levels of Rahu and Ketu influence, I think this might be it. So anyway, pretty mind-blowing. I've never seen anything like that. It's pretty I don't know if I'll ever see anything like this again, but it's yeah, pretty wild, which is again kind of the nature of eclipses and all 3 leaders. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what to say about that. Yeah, I think this might be the crux of what's going on right now. Because it didn't really make sense based on the general country synastry and the again leadership synastry until you get to this point. Anyway, again, my prayers go out to everybody. I know it's a really sensitive time. Hopefully, this brings some, information or perspective that's helpful. Yeah, and again, at least one of my spiritual teachers used to suggest that the best way to use a newspaper is sometimes use it as your prayer list for the day. So that's what I'm doing. But in any case, I wish you all the best and peace and goodwill for sure. As always, thank you so much for stopping by and listening to one of my talks. I appreciate all your support for my work in the channel and all the ways that you guys do that. Again, all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. For more famous birth charts, check out my birth charts archive list 2025 video where I list most of the famous charts I've analyzed so far. But again, I'll be updating that pretty soon, hopefully in April. I do offer individual birth chart readings as well as astrology classes. So if you want information on any of that, email heartlightastrology@yahoo.com. I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine, health, wellness, and lifestyle where I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, yoga, homeopathy, naturopathic medicine. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too for you as a resource. But as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so until the next one, take good care. Namaste.